a key member of the Iroko, a well-known pop musician. Gaspar started the B Music Association, ostensibly to look after black musicians. And he was involved in that set that up. Assigned to islands or people influenced by him emerged in the 1980s and 90s, including, next clip please, Buki Leo. So Buki tried his hand at lots of different things. You know, he was in the ska band at one point, and then he went onto the acid jazz scene and had like some, well, minor hits doing that type of music. But eventually he went back to playing Afrobeat, which is what he does now. His band is called Black Egypt. Next slide, please. And this is Dele Shosimi, who was actually in Fela's band as a young player, and still plays, well, holds a flame for Afrobeat today with his Afrobeat orchestra. He was also like a consultant on the musical, the Fela musical, which showed on Broadway and at the National Theatre here in London. And Tony Allen, who was the drummer on most of the memorable Fela Kuti records, was also based. Is she gone? Oh yeah, but you know, Viola, who sang at the very beginning today, she was in Yoruba Women's Choir. South African gospel singers, South African Jazz All-Stars, and a group that I led called the Vocal Ensemble of Africa. A member of the Vocal Ensemble of Africa, Eno Williams, next slide please, was probably inspired by some of the creative work we did in that group. Because what it was that we started with like my music, but within songs that I had, we would provide spaces for people of different African backgrounds to extemporize and improvise in their mother tongues. So you have like maybe people from South Africa singing in whichever language, you know, Uganda, etc., etc. And that, I believe, inspired Eno to go on and form her own group called Ibibio Sound Machine, which is pretty well known now on the festival circuit. Next slide, please. The Pentecostal church music scene is full of musicians of Nigerian heritage who have taken what is sometimes called the Bedu sensibility into praise and worship music. A lot of musicians of Nigerian heritage in London and other major cities are probably, well, living off being on retainers with Pentecostal churches, which is good in the sense that it keeps the wolf away from the door, of course, but it's also, you know, there are, you know, drawbacks to it because it somehow compromises, you know, their kind of, you know, the ability to function as like free agents and create the music they might want to create for themselves. But anyway, one of the leading people doing the actual gospel, Pentecostal gospel thing is this fellow here called Muyiwa. I think it's Muyiwa Olaniwaju. That's his full name, isn't it? Yes. Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to the next one, please. Yes. Not to be outdone, the class kept the flame started by Fela Showande burning. Akin Yuba studied in the UK originally, but was based in the UK in the USA in the latter part of his life and career. But he came to England frequently to run conferences at Churchill College, Cambridge. They were called Composition in Africa and the Diaspora. I took part in several of those conferences, and there'd be like recitals, performances, talks, various things going on. And nowadays, the work is being continued by the African Concert Series, led by Rebecca Omordia, who is of Romanian and Nigerian heritage. Showande's music is often included in the concert programming of orchestras, ensembles, and music festivals such as the BBC Proms. In the education sector, there have been many great Nigerian musicians who've taught thousands of young people about the inner workings of drum polyrhythms and African songs. Some notable contributors are Sunshine Ogunde, Emmanuel Josiah, both of blessed memory, Norris Johnson, your brother, Ginger Johnson's eldest son, Oshun Arts in Liverpool, led by Oladimeji Adisa, and of course, Iroko Theatre Company, led by Alex Pius. Anyway, this narrative has focused on key players, many of whom happen to be male. I'd like to show you the next image, please, of the Yoruba Women's Choir, standing there in their head ties, looking like stately galleons, as one reviewer put it. I mean, they've toured up and down the country, performing to packed houses, and I guess they are probably the main sort of female sort of force that has happened like from the Nigerian side of things. Next slide, please. And in recent times, the Mercury Music Prize of 2023 has been awarded to the Ezra Collective, a group of young musicians from diverse backgrounds, but seemingly led by British Nigerians. The group's music is classified as jazz, but the few YouTube clips I've watched and listened to clearly display influences from Fela and Anikulapo Kuti's sound and look. From Canon J.J. Ransom Kuti to the Ezra Collective, these musicians have brought influences and flavors from Nigerian music traditions into British music. I would now like to invite TC Official to tell us about Nigerian British rapper MCs and their contributions to grime and other musical genres. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Today, for those of you who don't know the rappers, I'll be your son, as most of you probably would know them. And I'd just like to throw it out there, I am a lawyer, almost soon to be a lawyer, so rapping is what I do for fun. So to begin, fine boy, no pimple. I'll throw it out. Sorry, let me start again. Fine boy, no pimple. I break it down out there, right now, it's simple. My Nigerians, we run in this music scene, who's repping green? That's our symbol. From Dizzy, Rascal, JME, Skepta, I kept her, note of these guys, because I'm next up. You understand? Okay, next point. From music, we're dominating this music scene. If you can't lose it, that's, wait, sorry, let me start again, apologies. From, hold on. Apologies. Okay. Hold on. One second. Yeah, let me start from the beginning. Sorry. Let me start from the beginning. Fine boy, no pimple. I break it down out there right now, it's simple. My Nigerians, we run in this music scene. Lord, this is bad. Yeah, I'll read it out. Okay, I'm back. Let's start. Fine, ready? Okay. Fine boy, no pimple. I'll break it down right now for you guys, it's simple. My Nigerians, we run in this music scene. He's repping green, that's our symbol. From Dizzy, Rascal, JME, Skepta, I kept her. Note of these guys because I'm next up. And everybody knows that our girls made the biggest checks. That's that Nigerian rapper called Miss Banks. That's my girlfriend. Now let me tell you about JME and all of the things that he's done for me. His bars are so good, he really kept me out of A&E. Now that's a punchline, kick back and see. We collecting these Mercuries, a different planet. They can't stand it, sit down, it's a habit. We can't lose from dominating music scenes. We're even boxing up man in a ring. That's KSI. Eat up that yam, bro, make his eyes sting. And Annie said it first, we have the pengest black girls. That's the best looking black girls. And they act well like little Sims. I want to be the next top boy so I can meet her, greet her, tell her that she does it for Africa. Now up next is Santan. Like Dave, we're making checks, ask Santan. I dare you to try and challenge me. You can't even manage me. They should take notes like Addison Lee. And I can make the earthquake like Tiny Temper. I'm a Niger boy in the German, EO. To bring it full circle for Niger. They started off a trend. I'm in it to the end. It's time to represent.
Thank you, PC Official. And in the third segment, there's going to be a Hall of Fame slideshow. And I'm going to sing and play some songs while you watch. These are all people of Nigerian heritage who have done other types of music.
Iṣẹ́ sure Juwon is happy to take them. And we also have TC Official, who will jump up again and answer any questions. Any questions from anyone? Yes, at the back.
It's not so much a question, it's just asking about Tunde Jegede, because he's also a Nigerian artist. I think he was born in Britain, wasn't he?
Yeah.
You know of him, don't you?
Yes, I do know Tunde.
Yeah.
I worked with Tunde, you know.
Sorry?
I worked with Tunde a lot
So,
for a very long time. For many years we worked together.
oh, so amazing music. I mean, I just discovered him by accident because I love music, so that means classical music as well. So when I came across his stuff, I was blown away. And he works quite a lot with contemporary artists as well, doesn't he? And he plays a lot of the kora, which I love.
Yes, the reason that I didn't mention Tunde is not, you know, not to kind of forget him or to like, or you know, erase him from history or anything, but more because the kora is a Senegambian instrument. It's not Nigerian music, is it?
But he doesn't just play the kora, though.
Yeah, but it's mainly what he plays, isn't it? Yes.
Yes. Yes. Well, I know, but he plays like, you know what I mean, he plays the Senegambian tradition music though. So that's why, yeah, that's the difference, I think. Yeah.
I think Juwon's response sort of tells us one of the complications of history as a subject. You have to select. The history is never, you know, it can never carry everyone. So the writer or the presenter of the history has to make some kind of selection, some basis of selection. And that's why we need other people to write histories to get a bigger picture. Yeah, that's normal. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Just to ask Juwon, what's going on with the young Nigerians in music now, who are following up with what you've done, what others have done?
When you say young Nigerians, do you mean young Nigerians in Britain or young Nigerians?
Yes, in Britain, in London actually.
Well, I think there are a variety of things happening. I think in some cases they are maybe becoming orchestral musicians. In some cases they are becoming jazz musicians. In some cases they are doing things like what like TC Official's doing, like they're doing like more, well, I don't want to use that term urban, it's not the right word to use, is it? But you know, like they're doing sort of like rap, MCing, Afro beats and all that sort of thing. I think that, well, in a way, what your question, I'm wondering though, Uncle P, whether there's a thing there about what's happening in the dance sector, because in music, I think like in the churches there are a lot of like these young musicians who can play, you know, in Nigerian idioms and stuff, and they do it. They play that music. I don't know how much they take it into like making a living otherwise than like playing in the church. But I think there are a lot of the British Nigerian musicians who play that type of music. And like they end up like maybe sometimes, like if, you know, when the pickup bands come, or when, hello, who's that there? People with their, come from Nigeria, like, and they need a pickup band, then they get musicians from here who understand the idioms, the musical idioms, and they can play in the backing groups with them. So maybe instead of bringing over a band, say, what's his name, Burna Boy or something like that, they might use local musicians from here to play instead. Yeah.
I wonder if another question to ask is, perhaps for younger Nigerians that are up and coming, that are in England, how about us sort of taking more pride in singing our native language rather than just English and putting that out there?
I think there are people that do that. That's the thing. I think because there's so many people of Nigerian heritage here, aren't there? And I mean, some of them do that like in the rap and the MCing side of things. Maybe not as much, well, if you're aiming to be like a pop star, if you're aiming to be in the Lighthouse family or something, I don't think you'd be singing in Yoruba or Igbo to do that, you know what I mean? But there again, like Ibibio Sound Machine is sort of pop, and it's called Ibibio Sound Machine.
So
Maybe more of a fusion. I like to say it's already happening. More of a fusion of they sing in English and rap in Yoruba, or they rap in Yoruba and sing in whichever way. That's what I'm saying. But maybe that's what you're saying that they're doing in terms of fusing.
Yeah, they're fusing, yes.
Any other questions?
Yeah, are you the singer from Lighthouse Family?
No, I'm not the singer. No. No.
That's Tunde Bayo, he was up there. That's it there. No, it's not there.
Who apparently is a stepson of Obasanjo's. Did you know that?
Yes. Yeah.
So, since we have TC here, who's a young Nigerian musician, he might want to step up and say what young Nigerian musicians are doing in your genre. Is it grime? Melodic Afrobeat.
Yeah, but he plays instruments as well.
Yeah. Can you just tell us maybe a bit about yourself and other things?
Okay. So, well, just ask again. Let me answer that properly.
Yeah.
Ask you again. Could you ask again?
Can you just tell us how you came into music?
Well, it started in a university, just listening to many artists. I just realized, listening to them saying, my brother and myself were taught by my dad, he taught us instruments. And I said, why don't I use this, incorporate jazz and classical Afrobeats into rap? So while I do it, it's conscious, it has more, it's better than normal rap. Rap is just basic, but this one is more complex in that sense. So.
You want to start a debate here, TC?
I'm ready.
Sounds like Burner Boy. That's what Burner Boy was saying, wasn't it?
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Take the last question before we move on. I just want to.
Yes.
I just say what a wonderful voice you have. Thank you.
Oh, very kind.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Julian.
Thank you.
I just want to remind Juan sometimes hasn't known how much influence he's got on young people. My son picked up Juan's voice, and it's now Afro-Not Zulu. I'm surprised you didn't mention him. He has his own band, and he's a singer in London today.
Well, I know that he's...
So, and he started singing because he had you singing Marshall.
Oh, right.
So,
Say that Joan Ogungbe has had a great influence. He's composed music for many theatre directors in the African theatre scene and beyond that. And as you can see, he's an accomplished singer in his own right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to continue with the quiz before we move on to the next talk. Can anyone identify this British Nigerian? Yeah, or, yes, name? Yes. I thought no one would get this.
It's right here, it's right here.
Oh. Thank you. Can anyone? Yes, you are correct. A mathematician. She's famous for getting her GCSEs, I think, at the age of 11.
Yes,
GCSE. A whole family. Yeah. So, and a master's degree in mathematics and computer science from the University of Oxford. So with that, we're going to move on to our next person. And now we have an author and educator, Florence Olajide.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. I was asked to talk about race and culture and identity. I'm not going to say an awful lot about race, other than that I personally believe that race is a construct, it's a social construct that is underpinned by the notion of one race's superiority over another. And personally, I believe there's only one race, and that's the human race. So I don't think we need to say an awful lot more about race. But I will talk a lot about identity and culture. Can sort of move on to the next one, please. Okay. So when we talk about identity, what do we mean? I see myself through lots of different lenses. When I wake up in the morning and I look at a mirror, I see a woman. I like to think a middle-class woman, although I know in England we don't like to talk about class, but we all slot in somewhere. I see someone who's middle-aged. I see someone who's an educator. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. I'm black. I'm British. I'm Nigerian. And I'm also African. And I wear all those multiple identities all at once. And I haven't even talked about my political inclinations. So we all have multiple identities. Some of those are labels that have been fostered on us. Some of those are labels that we chose ourselves, whether that's for good or bad. And alongside those labels, there are things that are cultural. For me, next slide, please. The next one, sorry. And if you keep going, I didn't realize I'd gone that far ahead. Next, until we get to the next slide. There we are, culture. So what is culture? It's the ideas and customs and social behaviors of a group of people or society. And as Nigerians, we talk a lot about our culture. But even within a culture, there are subcultures. So the youth might have certain behaviors that they consider to be their own cultural identity within a culture. For me, as an individual, I am a product of more than one culture. And I've lived my life straddling two different cultures. I am one of those generation of children who were born of Nigerian parents in the 50s and 60s in the UK. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. When our parents were here, and earlier on in the morning we listened to Professor Adi, who was talking about that migration of people in the 40s and the 50s. Due to cultural pressures and cultural expectations of marriage, our parents' generation went on to have children very quickly as soon as they arrived. And yet most of them were self-funding students who had to study during the day and work in the evenings to pay for their education. So then they had this dilemma, what to do with all these children that they were producing. Somewhere in 1955, an advert was put in a nursery newspaper with a picture of a beautiful black baby saying that this baby needs a loving home. And from that moment on, a practice that we now know as farming
i.e. you farm your children out for someone else to look after them for you, was born. Now, I don't know what the exact number is in terms of the number of children who've been affected by this phenomenon. About 3 years ago, I was part of an ITV article that quoted a figure of 3,000 people. This week, Metro somehow got a figure of 70,000 children. Somewhere between 3,000 and 70,000 is the true figure. But it's mind-boggling how many children were affected by this phenomenon. And it's interesting that a lot has been said about the Windrush generation, but not a lot has been said about our parents' generation, and they've almost been airbrushed out of history. So we went to live in white homes. From the moment I was about 2 months old, till I was 6 years old, my family was white. My mother was white. My father was white. My brother was white. But I had an entirely different family that was all black. That consisted of my biological mother, my biological father, and biological siblings who lived separately. And what our parents did was pay our white host families to look after us. And we saw our parents sometimes at the weekends, sometimes we could go months without seeing them, and I've got friends who went years without seeing their parents. And then at some point, our parents finished their studies and they turned up and picked us up from our foster homes. Some might call it kidnapping, inverted commas. Some people were tricked into boarding the planes, but the long and short of it was that we suddenly found ourselves in Africa, Nigeria, in a foreign nation where we didn't speak the language, where we didn't understand the customs, or the cultural expectations that went with that, and where we were grieving the loss of what up to that moment was our families. And for some of those children were already in their teens when that happened to them. Some of us were younger. I was 6, my husband was 7, and I've got friends here who were younger. Now, some people say that our parents were cruel to do that to us. I'm not one to pass judgment on a generation because we didn't live their lives. They had their struggles, and most of us know a little bit about the history of the times that they were studying in and the challenges that they faced. And bearing in mind that I know from my parents' stories and my grandparents' stories that it's quite a normal thing for the extended African family to help look after children. I don't think it's too far of a stretch in the imagination to see how our parents might have extended that idea just a little bit and paid for the care for the children that they couldn't manage themselves. But the issue for us is what happened to those children? The next slide, please. For many of us, it was catastrophic. There's an issue of cultural dissonance. When you're in a culture where everything, it's a bit like, imagine you're a human and you suddenly just got dropped on Mars, where you don't know the rules of the game, but you're expected to play the game. So for us, we were lost. We were in a culture where we didn't understand what the rules were, but we were expected to abide by them. We didn't know who we were. Some of you have experienced what I'm talking about are in the room. We were called Oyibo. Oyibo in Yoruba means white person. So here you are, black. Everyone else around you, black. You're white. Yep. Now the interesting thing about the word Oyibo, was that depending on who was saying it, it could be a slur or an endearment. So my maternal grandparents, who had great pride in the fact that they had a granddaughter who'd been born in the land of the great queen, whenever they called me Oyibo, to them that was something of pride. But my paternal grandmother, who was living with us and suddenly had this useless child who did not know how to behave, who asked why when told to do something, it was a problem. And when she said Oyibo, it wasn't to congratulate me on where I came from. It was to tell me that I was other. So in a land that should have been our own, amongst people who should have been our people, we were the other. And so for us, there was a loss of identity, abuse at school. I had friends who were told to pronounce their surnames, which they couldn't do because they spent the first few years of their lives speaking English and speaking their surnames with an English accent. And so they got picked up. And trauma. And I won't go into details about the trauma because everyone's experience was different. But almost every one of us experienced trauma on some sort of level. And depending on your personality, how you dealt with that situation, different. You might not be able to tell from just looking at me, but I was one of those labeled a rebel because I wouldn't behave. So those were the negative bits of it. But given that context in which the human spirit wants to survive, there were positive things that came out of that. You can have the next slide. It built resilience. You had to be to survive. And so we learned to be resilient. But also the other way around, because fast forward 2 decades later, I'm back in the UK. Now I've spent most of my early years in Nigeria dreaming of that return back to the place where I belong. Except that when I arrived in Heathrow, the first question the immigration officer asked me is, "When are you returning?" And I still remember to this day looking him in the eye saying, "I've come home." I had no expectations of returning anyway. But that was just a sign of what was to come. Because when I got here, I was definitely not Oyibo. As far as what everyone saw on the outside, I was as black as they could. And therefore I learned to deal with the subtle forms of racism. There are the obvious ones, some of us have experienced that. What about the ones that are hidden? When you start going through layers of bureaucracy, you start digging through the system. So we had to be resilient to learn to deal with that. Next one, please. Tenacity. You had to be a bit like a dog with a bone to get where we all got to. And in both worlds. And the next slide, please. Enterprise. We've had to create our own opportunities, especially where our needs were not being met by the mainstream society that we were living in. So we didn't just sit back and say, well, you know, world's hard, what can you do about it? We went around things that we couldn't move, and we changed things that we could change. It's fascinating because, if you can sort of just go back to the last slide. Those three attributes are things that I believe are inherently Nigerian about us. I've never met a Nigerian who isn't resilient. I've never met one who does not have tenacity. And I've never met one who isn't enterprising.
And that includes all those children who, because for some of us who were fostered, sadly, the link between the biological parents was permanently broken, and those children got adopted by their white families. And even those Nigerians have all that. And it's fascinating. I remember an English friend of mine who worked in Nigeria for many, many, many years once said to me that if Nigerians could get their act together, they would rule the world. And those three attributes, I think, are inherently in us, has helped those of us who went through that experience, not just to survive, but to thrive. And thriving is what we're doing here. And we've raised a generation of children who have a Nigerian heritage. My children are almost middle-aged. They're in their 40s now. And I've got grandchildren. And we're raising them to recognize their heritage, both English and Nigerian. My husband and I used to play a game in the 80s. When we went to a cinema, we were watching a film at home. And we used to call the game, if we could go to the next, Spot the Nigerian. And we'll watch the credits as they roll down at the end of the movie to see if we could find any Nigerian names. And we got to a point where we started, if we saw a Japanese name, we'll shout Nigerian, because that was as close to a Nigerian name as you were ever going to find in the media and the arts in those days. Now we don't play that game anymore, because it's no fun. Way too many Nigerian names that just scroll down the pages. And that's a testament to where we're at. That it doesn't matter which stream of life you search, we're there. And it's down to those three characteristics: our resilience, our tenacity, and our enterprise. We are everywhere. My husband and I, we like to travel a lot. And I remember once being on an ice field in Alaska. And there were flags in the shop that you could buy from your country and put it on, say, someone from this country has been here. We were so excited. We were thinking we were going to be the first Nigerians to put a flag on it. Well, we weren't. Nigerian flag was already standing by the time we got there. So it's amazing to see where we've come from the 80s to where we're at right now. Next slide, please. It's a little bit about my memoir. That's what it's about. It took me 15 years to write it, mainly because of my job, not because for any other reason other than I was a head teacher at that time in life. And the nature of being a head teacher was just that the only time I could write was during the school breaks. And then COVID happened, and I thought, I'm going to finish this memoir because I just have to. So I finished the memoir, and it's doing well. But what actually happened as a result of the memoir is that people started reaching out to me, saying, I was farmed, and I was farmed, and I was farmed. And eventually I found myself in a room with the farmed. And it was the most surreal experience of my life, because I felt that I was amongst sisters. Sisters who saw me, who got me, to whom I did not need to apologize for my Britishness, to whom I did not need to apologize because I wasn't Nigerian enough. And when I think that there might be 70,000 of us out there, that's an awfully big community. Now I feel like I belong. It took a long time, and for most of us, when we share our stories, to find our place here was hard, because we were neither one nor the other. And it took many years of self-searching and asking, how do I fit in? How do I make sense of these two cultures in my life? Especially since those cultures, most of the time, are quite opposing in nature. You know, in one case, if my teacher's talking to me here, I've got to look them in the eye. If my grandma's talking to me, I need to look on the ground. It's trying to make sense of all of that. So people ask me why I titled the memoir Coconut. And yes, to some degree, when I was much younger, there was a part of me that saw myself as this white child in a black body. But by the time I started writing the memoir, the coconut took on a new significance for me. Next slide, please. So, next one. Thank you. So it's got a brown shell. And for me, that brown shell kind of signifies all the knocks in life that harden you and toughen you up for the job ahead. Just like a coconut shell protects what's inside. Next. The white flesh inside, the core of who I am. It took a while for me to figure that one out. And I'm a mix of both those cultures. There are things about my Nigerian identity that I hold dear. There are things about the culture I will never accept. But then also, I'm not so idealistic about my Britishness either. And there are aspects of British identity that I hold dear, and there are bits I reject. So that core of me. And then the third part is the colourless water. And the thing about the coconut is that it's one of those fruits that every part of it is useful. There isn't a bit of a coconut that isn't put to good use. And to me, it was almost like the journey of my life. The colourless water to me symbolises that bit of giving back. And I found, once I figured out who I was, that and because as an educator, I'm leading a school, 80% of my children were black, about 70% of those were from black African, black Nigerian families. So I realised that even though those children hadn't been raised in white families, they were actually being raised within a white culture, but they had to go home to an African culture. So they were going through many of the experiences I had experienced in a slightly different context. And that's when I began to stop thinking and worrying about myself and my own issues, start thinking about how can I use those experiences to help those who are coming behind. And that for me signifies the colourless water, the life-giving bit, the giving back to society, giving back to others and helping others. So that's actually what the title Coconut means in terms of my memoir. And these days, I have a community, next slide please, of coconuts, people with whom I bond for no other reason other than that we get each other. You probably know a lot of us in your lives somewhere or the other. And if there are 70,000 of us walking around, then you probably know a few more than you actually know. And it's been interesting. I don't know if some of you may have heard of the documentary that came out earlier on this week called White Nanny, Black Child. And actually some people who were in that documentary are in this room, but I'll let them identify themselves if they wish to. And it's been fascinating that it's in this time and in this space that that story is emerging. And hopefully it would help us as a community to develop a better understanding of what otherness means and what a weapon it can be, and to have more consideration for others who are not quite like us, for whatever reason, as we walk around in our daily lives. And I think at that point I'll end.
Very heartfelt. It really touched me because I had a white nanny too. And happily my parents didn't have to kidnap me. They stayed in touch until she passed away. But I completely get this idea of feeling you belong nowhere. Yeah, let's take some questions. Does anyone have a question? Yes, please.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story. Very heartfelt, extremely beautiful. It's just a contribution. What I wanted to say is I can relate to some of the things you said. I'm of mixed heritage, half German, half Nigerian. And I lived for some years in Nigeria, my primary and secondary school, so I really enjoyed it. And the word you brought up, Oivo, I experienced it on a daily basis. Everywhere I went. In fact, sometimes going to the market, I have a group of children around me, Oivo. And for me, it didn't really affect me. I was so used to it, it was nothing. But the point I'm trying to make is that I can feel what you felt in that like almost split identity, because it's like I'm neither white, I'm neither black. So in Nigeria, everybody always called me white. Coming here, I'm not white. Even though I grew up in Nigeria, but we always used to go to Germany on holidays. But you know, when you go to a holiday in a country, it's different from when you're walking, you're bringing up your family. So I brought up my family here, my children are all grown. I'm a grandmother myself, 3 beautiful children. And I remember on one particular workplace I was working, people always used to say, oh, you should have no problem in the workplace because you're white. I said, no, nobody sees me as white. I am not white. So that has always been a struggle for me, having two identities. I don't even know if I should call it identities, but I'm neither black or white. And I remember growing up in Nigeria, I used to wish there was an island with mixed race children just like myself, because I didn't fit anywhere. So it's still, I'm still on the journey. So thank you for sharing your story. I look forward to buying your book and reading. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I don't think there's anything else I need to add on to that. Yeah, it's a shared experience amongst many.
Hi, thank you so much for what you shared.
Hi, so my name is Kemi Lohide. It's been amazing because I can totally relate. I was fostered, same thing. My experience was really positive, but it was making that connection back home. And I think one of the things I want to bring out of this, not so much a question, is it was a continuous battle for me. I remember standing in front of my parents many years ago to say, I want to be an artist. And my mom looked at me and said, did you hear your daughter? She wants to be Oluya. You know, the Oluya was said as in, it had a double meaning. But I remember purposely failing my YA because the passion to be an artist outweighed the passion to be a lawyer, because my parents would help me fill the paperwork. And my mom was constantly, that Oyinbo that brought you up, you know, you cannot be an artist because in Nigeria, yeah, you must read your book. But I think it was a constant thing. By the time I came back to England, had my kids, went on, fun enough, into education, became an art teacher, secondary school for about 25 years. And I remember saying something to my son. He built a completely different relationship with my Nigerian parents. I'm still in touch with my foster family to today. Both my foster parents are dead. And my foster brothers and sisters, who were biological children of my foster parents, are still, well, 2 are still alive. But my son built a completely different relationship with my Nigerian parent, my Nigerian mom. My dad was passed many years ago. And I remember once when my son was really young, and I would say, if you don't behave yourself, I'm going to send you back to Nigeria. And one day my son summoned the courage to my 5'1" self and said, Mom, you know, the way you talk about Nigeria at times like it's really bad. And the reason why I say that is because they had a completely different experience. Nigeria was the breaking of a new dawn for them. When I taught in a Essex or East London school, where 90% of the kids were white, there was probably about 10% black, Asian, and my son happened to be in the same school I was teaching. And it was amazing that Nigerian children are thriving. And whenever they would ask me, Miss, where are you from? And I'd go, oh, I was born here, I'm British. And they'd go, no, you're not, Miss. Your name's Aloide, you're Nigerian. Whenever my son introduces himself, the first thing he says, I'm Nigerian British. And he drew a conclusion one day and he said, Mom, you always say you're British before you say you're Nigerian. And I said, you have to understand the generation I came from. When we were playing in a playground, I was brought up in Brighton, you had to prove yourself to be accepted. I am part of this crew, I'm part of the playground. So when they say go back home, you say, well, I can't go back home because I'm British. Now, it's a very different narrative to the kids that I've taught and my son's generation. If they were told go back home, they would show everybody else where to go and where home was. So you know, I'm so grateful to hear, and I totally relate to what you're saying. And I remember even when I was taken back to school in Nigeria, the first thing we did was to find out all the kids that were born in England, and we just huddled together because we all had that same experience. I think in our case, we were sort of told we're going on a holiday to Nigeria. My foster parents were completely gutted. Yeah, my sister always joke about it, that it's the first longest unrecorded holiday that did not enter the Guinness Book of Records. And I probably still am on that holiday. But thank you so much for what you shared. And it's encouraging to know a lot of us are not alone in that journey.
One more question, please. Or comment. I've always forgotten what I was going to say.
Okay, right. I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you. And I watched the program and I've met some of the ladies. Amazing stuff. I was going to say, just to comment on the neither this nor that. It's interesting because my kids are mixed race. And I always say to them, you are English and you are Nigerian. So whenever anything is happening, it's to do with, you know, English culture, I drag them there. And like today, you know, one was here looking at now. In terms of family life, I was one of those as well. But my parents dragged me back to Nigeria when I was about 3. And they would always say to me, you should be grateful. You know, this was before I even knew what it was all about. You should be grateful. So many of the children were left with nannies. So I sort of grew up with that. You know, be grateful you were back in Nigeria. Anyway, I won't go into all the other stuff, but yeah, thank you.
Right, we've got our last speaker for today. And don't run off after this last speaker because we also have a... So please don't run off after the next speaker because we do have a nice surprise. But let's go on to our next speaker, Michelle Yard, founder of Way with Words.
Thank you. Good evening, afternoon. Can you hear me? I'm not used to not having my laptop in front of me, so I don't know how this is going to work out at all. So it hasn't come up yet. Thank you for the speakers that went before me. Really, really interesting and really heartwarming. I'm here, I was asked to speak on African spirituality, and which obviously is a big thing, so I'm not really going to be speaking on the totality of African spirituality. I'm going to speak about an aspect that connects us and how it operates in London. Yeah, so this is just going to be like a brief overview of what that is. This is just a slide of ocean ritual, which I'll explain that we did this August. If you go to the next one, they're going to be whistle stop. This is me, and this is from the ocean ritual that we did in August, which has been going for 7 years now, and I'll explain that. If you keep going to the slide, these are the intro slides. Okay, so I'm a founding member of this group. We're still in the process of setting it up effectively, but we realized that we didn't think that there was something that would draw different African diasporic traditions together. where it would be, whether it be Ifa, whether it be like Candomblé. Candomblé is the version in Brazil, or Santeria, or where I'm from, so I should say that I'm Guyanese. I felt a bit imposterish, but I hope you'll welcome me into the Nigeria fold. And so yeah, Comfa, which is Guyanese Comfa, that's the one that I did my PhD in, as well as literature. And Comfa comes from the Ghanaian Akom, which means that's their traditional priest. And although obviously, you know, we were rooted up and dragged across the Atlantic, obviously we kept some of these systems, some of them merged with those we found there, and Comfa is one of those. But a lot of Guyanese who might practice Comfa naturally actually don't know that it's linked back to a specific place on the continent of Africa. So yeah, so we are here, we set up this, this group, which is still in formation for loads of different reasons, because we wanted to address the fact that actually African spiritual practices in the UK are not really recognized. In fact, the opposite is true of them. They are demonized, yeah? And so we wanted to address that. So it's part of a campaigning effort for it to be recognized. If you go to the next one. So what does it even really look like? So no matter where you come from, yeah, different people have done different researches and so on. We've agreed that we will accept that these are some tenets that we can all draw from and say, yeah, I recognize that these are some of the things that we can all agree on from the disparate and different parts of the continent, that we do have a supreme being. Yes, we believe in a supreme being that created everything. We have a knowledge and affiliation with natural forces, forces of nature, the water, the earth itself, and those we call different names. So in Yoruba is Orisha, Loa, which is from the Haitian Voodoo system, and then Abosom, which is from the Ghanaian, Neteru is from ancient Africa, Kemet, Nkisi, and so on. These are just different aspects of the forces of nature. And of course, we work with nature. We all know herbs. Every one of us know about the use and application of herbs. But actually, it's under the removed practice into the diaspora. We call it Obiaism. Yeah, you might have heard. Has anyone heard of Obia? Yeah. A few of you have heard of Obia. Now, when it's gone into that version, then this extra layer of demonization took place. And the reason for that is because we, in that plantation system, were using these herbs to poison the enslavers or do other things with them. Yeah, we were managing them, yeah, with these herbs because we knew. So most of you will have heard of the Haitian Revolution, for example. Yeah, the Haitian Revolution liberated itself through the use of their indigenous spiritual system. They prayed to what they identified as their God to deal with the other God who had obviously enslaved them, because they're like, well, if you were our God, you wouldn't have done this to us, so can you come our God and deal with these people? Which is why Haiti remains one of those places where it's just perpetually in some kind of issue. And actually, most of our people, most Africans, in the diaspora, and I dare say on the continent, believe that Haiti is, the reason why Haiti is like that is because they do all that voodoo stuff. They believe this, that this is why Haiti is in the situation that it's in. The economics, the political, the fact that they actually chucked the French out, they chucked the Spanish out, they chucked all of them, and then on top of it, had to be further colonized by the French, who continued to exact monies from them up until only recently. So these are some of the things. But the other thing I should say is that, so those herbal practices that were happening, the British, and I think it's mainly the British, outlawed it. So they knew that this was a real thing, and they outlawed it across the Caribbean, and that's still the case. So part of our campaign is to revert that. You can't practice, you can't do like mediumship. You know, when I say mediumship, you can go to somebody and they can divine for you. You can't really do that in this country technically as a white person anyway. So they still haven't those laws that were basically outlawing some of the things that we naturally would have done. here and for other Africans. So, and then ancestors and ancestorhood. The reason why I've got this arrow pointing to it, because if on the continent we can disagree about how we revere God or how we see a God, and I'm using the word God because that's what we all understand, but in our different spaces we would call that energy something else, okay? Because we will agree that our ancestors are something of importance. The only reason when we don't agree or we don't acknowledge and we don't accept ancestors is when we have moved or have been imposed upon us the other religions. So for example, a Christian religion tends not to allow us to acknowledge our ancestors. Does everyone agree with that? Does everyone know that? And that's the case. However, indigenously, that's the one thing that would mobilize all of us as Africans. And that's who, again, the Haitians, for example, called upon. And then, of course, all the rest you can recognize, whether it's praying, pouring libations, which some of us naturally do. Sometimes you might even try to not do it. You might try to not pour the libation, which we know what libation is. But that water or that bottle is standing there and you're doing your thing and you've forgotten to pour the libation, it falls, yes? These are things that I've seen happen over and over again when we just forget to do these things. Okay, so these are some of the different names we have. If you go to the next slide, please. Okay, where are we? Okay, so there's generally a misrepresentation about it. So this might, if you press it, it might play. I don't even know because I've not sound checked. This thing here that you can't see it yet. Let's see if you can play.
Very often, when we bring up the topic of African spirituality, the first thing we will tell you that, oh, what do you mean? That juju stuff, oh yeah, you know, that witchcraft. And it's a bit sad because when we say that, it's almost like saying Islam is IS, or Christianity is the Crusaders who went around and killed thousands of people, all in the name of their God. We cannot conflate. Every system, everything in existence has a duality to it. There's a positive aspect to it, and then there's a, you could say, a negative aspect that people choose to use. So what we call witchcraft is principles within African spirituality that people might use really selfish gain. It's usually for their own gain. You know, it might be something material, it might be to make money, it might be to get a partner, and it's only for self-gratification. But remember, as I've said from the beginning, African spirituality is a system of finding your own power. It's about remembering why you decided to manifest in this body and live this life journey. So it has nothing to do with self-gratification only. But one of the ultimate purposes within African spirituality is that when you pass, you're held in a position of an ancestor. A person who lived and live such a life that people want to emulate that lifestyle. It's become your inspiration to them. That's what African spirituality is. Witchcraft is just using principles within African spirituality for their own self.
All right, thank you. You can put forward it on. So Dalian Adoso, he's done a documentary with his wife. Yeah, you could. This is for you to really answer that. A documentary called Ancestral Voices. So it's quite big actually, it's grown momentum, where they went around and interviewed loads of different elements of African spirituality across the world actually, and they put that into a documentary. So and he's part of the Cadiz group as well, so we come upon these same things over and over again. It's a misrepresentation. So does anyone know which film this is from, this image? Pirates of the Caribbean. And when you see this image, the spiritualists, the spiritual practitioner always look crazy. Like they're always looking like this is what they look like. No matter which film it is, you know, usually the American ones, they've got them looking just raggedy, you know, like it's proper. So this is kind of a misrepresentation. If you really go to an Obia practitioner or a spirit or a reader or a diviner, they don't look like this, yeah? They would look like me, probably. Yeah, they could look like me, or the sister over here with her lovely head tie, yeah, doing Oshu, okay? So let's go to the next one, please. The next one, let's just play that again. Okay, all right, okay, so this is an anthology that I put together, I edited, and I published as well. This is just saying that Dr. Kimani Nahusi, who's a historian, one of our historians, he's telling us about one of the aspects of African spirituality, which is Mami Wata. Mami Wata is an engagement with the primal elements of water, and people in the African tradition, the first tradition of humanity, the one that provides the archetypes of culture the world over. So we know about Umoja, Yimanka, Olokun, which is the dual of them, Mami Oshun, which is also from the Yoruba system, Oya as well, in modern West Africa, and the African diaspora. These energies or entities announce the connections to some of the earliest known examples of ourselves in the ancient Nile Valley, where Nu or Nun is the primal sea, in which divinities are portals that leading to the house of our ancestors, a vast storehouse of knowledge, of a different way of knowing and living and celebrating life acquired through uncounted generations of observation. Basically, how do we know these things? How do we know that, like, you know, ocean is this color, or you know, they like these offerings, or Igbo? What he's saying there is this is through our memory, this is through our orality over and over again of observances, then we pin this down and say this is what that is, okay? So this book, In Search of Mami Wata, which was published in 2020, came into being partly in response to the crazy response to the fact that they were going to have a black Little Mermaid. Do you see that? They went crazy because they're like, there's no mermaid anywhere else but in Denmark. Yeah, and they looked like this. So I was like, this is crazy. So I just asked some people on Facebook or wherever, social media, to contribute to this anthology, and also to send in their short stories or their own interaction or engagement with it. Some of them are creatives as well, so can you draw an image of Mami Wata and so on, or water spirits. So this is how this book came into being, and I also have these as well. So let's go along to the next slide. And the point of this was really to say that, so this is obviously Africa, as we all know. So every part of this, yeah, there is a specific African spiritual system that I don't know all of. But everywhere there is this indigenous practice. The next one, again, so when we were shipped over to the, wherever we are in South America here, I'm from Guyana, so I'm up top, over there next to Venezuela. Wherever you are on there, and there's a group of Africans, those systems have carried across. And what do you think the system that is carried across most? Which system from Africa has carried across into the Caribbean most? Yoruba, which is why some people get a bit vexed, a bit upset that we Oshun, or Ifa. That's because Ifa presents itself and has presented itself to us, or we have carried it and it went forward, it traveled. So it's not any preference or anything like that. We're not like, you know, predominantly looking at Ifa. It's just the way it's carried itself. Go again, please, sorry. And then this one is to show equally that now when you come into the Caribbean, every place in here where there are a group of Africans, you will find a repository that connects us back to some part of Africa. For example, Puerto Rico, in the middle there. We went to Puerto Rico as part of a cruise. We landed in Puerto Rico and just found ourselves in this art gallery. Actually, it was this area where it was a group of, this area is Louisa, where it's Africans mainly. And went there, found ourselves in an art gallery, and we're speaking to the artist, and I actually noticed that he had this really beautiful sculpture. And then he was speaking in Spanish, we were having to translate, but I heard one word, I heard Osain. And I was like, Osain, which is one of our Yoruba forces of nature that is to do with like healing and herbs and so on. And then we will create them into a sculpture and what have you. It's represented as a wood. Yeah, I'm doing this. It's like that. He's got like one leg, I think. So he did this, and so then we had this amazing exchange now, because we're like, okay, and then he talked about Oshun and all the rest and so on. So it's every part we find ourselves. Next slide, please. And these are just quickly to say that these are just some of the derivatives of the African spiritual systems across the diaspora, and of course some are still practiced on the continent. I've put up there this Holy Udu, which is from the Ifa system, just because we were on a program. We managed to get on 2020, you know, when George Floyd, bless him, was killed, and it was like, we know about black people, we want to know about you now, yeah? So there was this big drive to find out about us. We found ourselves on BBC Sunday Morning Live. Not physically, they came into my house and interviewed me, because at that time it was still sort of on lockdown. And so we did this program, and they then edited it, and then it was presented. And there was a bit that one of their experts, who was a Chinese guy, said at the end, and that's how they ended it. And it basically said that we didn't have a tenet, we didn't have anything. It was like, you know, it's all well you want recognition for your African spiritual system, but to do that you really need, you just thought we were just a random group that was deciding we wanted recognition. So we were like, actually, no, we have a tenet, we have a system. It's a real thing. It's not like we are making something up new. So this is why I always put this there, to say at least we have these, which are the Odu, which you can look up. Next slide, please. I'm trying to whisk through. Okay, obviously the Oshun festival is what we are connecting to when we do the African traditional practice here. The Oshun River ritual is connected to here. And most of you should know that this is a sacred grove in Nigeria that's recognized by UNESCO. So in our campaign, we say, this is why we want you to recognize at the Oshun festival that we do, or the ritual that we do here in the UK, because UNESCO recognizes it in Nigeria. So there needs to be some kind of joined up thinking and less discrimination in terms of how we view the practice, yeah? So let's go forward. This is us now appearing on, where are we here? On Sunday Morning Live this year. So we were on it before, but because of that bit, I wrote a letter to them saying, this, you didn't represent us, it wasn't proper, we need to come back so that we can have the proper recognition. So what they did, they actually invited us back this year, because we have a beautiful sister that works on this program. So she invited us back, and a few of us went, and they asked us to make just a demo offering, an Igbo, which we did, and then they filmed it and showed it a week before we're going to do this ritual in London. So if you go forward again. And this is just showing, this is in the book, by the way, so some of these offerings that we do, which is the offerings we would take to give to Mami Oshun. Why Mami Oshun? She is the goddess, if you like, or the deity, or the Orisha of sweetness, of water, river. Yeah, so we go to her, and we can take her any number of these things in multiples, yeah? So this is a young brother who had been coming for several years to the Oshun River ritual. Again, a lot of us are from the diaspora, but actually recently I've noticed that a lot of young Yoruba, Nigerian, actually wider continental Africans have started to come to this. If you go on. And this is one of them. So actually, no, this is this year's one. So we were on Sunday Morning Live, and what happened is it triggered everyone to go, oh, this thing is happening, it's happening in London. When you look at the pictures, you think it's somewhere not in London. And this is in South London, in Morden, in a park where I've just come from to present on Mami Wata to 3 to 6 year olds. And most of those were European white children. So this is this drive, this is this motion in terms of getting African spirituality recognized, respected, and practiced confidently, rather than doing it, sort of like secretly. And it can complement whatever else we're doing as well. If you go along. And this was actually earlier, this was in 2020. So we started to actually go into the river now and take over. You know us Africans. Eventually we were going and we would throw the, the offering in. We were like, yeah, we're coming along, sing, 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 throw. But then we found another area where we could actually get into the water and give Mummy Oshun the actual offering. So this was that year. Next one. Okay. Oh, and this is just to show you that there is an element to the to Oshun and to Mami Wata, which is to do with sustainability. Okay. So you can press that. That's really short as well. It might not even play. If it doesn't play loud.
Once again, come together. It is the 2021 London Rivers Week. So Thames 21 worked with the communities to get involved in the river conservation, cleaning up parts of the river. And they've teamed up with the annual Ocean River Ritual organizers. I went there last Sunday and it was called Honoring Mana Osan, the river cleanup and ritual offering.
Yeah, we do events. We're trying to do more cultural events while the river. So celebrating how people value the river, exploring how different people can come together on the river. So this is a pilot activity, I guess. It's something that we haven't done previously. Well, we do clean-ups all the time, but we just invite communities to come in now or locally to pilot to see how different people practice. So it's the first time that we collaborate with this group. So it's quite exciting.
Okay, you can stop it a minute there. Basically, what we don't know, because I am not like, I am a facilitator and educator, is some of the songs. So we don't have some of the original Yoruba song. We have a few, but because we don't speak the language or whatever. So sometimes I make up random songs. So that was one where I was trying to call issue. But where that is on the Thames, Battersea Bridge area, where they do a cleanup. So I'm a trustee member of this charity, an environmental charity, and they do this cleanup. And then after they do the cleanup, we do an offering to the river, which is something they've never done before. This is where your home from home is actually taking on new meaning. Let's go to in terms of the spiritual side of things. Another, and this was actually this year as well. Because it just spreads, doesn't it? So this was one that I did for the Oxo Tower. So corporates are now interested in doing the river cleanup, but then now they're also interested in the offering to Mami Oshun along the river. So this is what's happening. Now the Hindu communities do this all the time. So when we go, I like what you were saying about the coconut. You see, when we go, like when I went to this one, there were lots of coconuts along the river, because I'm guessing that those are the Hindu communities who also go to the river to do their rituals. But actually now we can start to think, well, maybe that coconut might be from someone going on a ocean there as well. And you notice that part of this was a mock offering that we did. Well, actually it was a real offering because we put it in, and it was a communal one. What I like about what you said about the coconut is because coconut is really important for us to put in there, because within it, that shell, that enclosure, is when you pray to, you could just do this offering with just the coconut. So you could rub it, and you're just praying and you're just talking to it and you're telling it what you want, and it's hidden inside there. It's not broken. And then you put that into the river. That's why I love the coconut. Next one I think might be okay, these are just some images from the book. So when you ask people to send in their ideas, their image, their notion of water spirits, we got some beautiful images people representing. And I like this one. This is one of my favorite, the goddess next door, because there are those of us who are practicing our tradition, but you have no idea that there's a goddess living right next door to you who is is invested in Mami Oshun or Mami Yemuja, and so on. And then this is another one, the Oshun Heteru. This is mixing, syncretizing Oshun with one of the ancient Egyptian icons, deity as well. So I love those. Next one, I think we're nearly. And yes, this is to say, now this is a Nigerian writer, producer, I think. And so this is coming on the 18th of November at the BFI, Mami Wata. So you see, it's like, it's all relevant at the moment. So this sister was asking about that. So I'm saying, yeah, this is African Odysseys program at the BFI. I'm on the steering group for this. So this will be on it. I think I finished. Thank you very much.
Okay, so time for question and answer or comment. Do you have any questions? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, good evening everyone again. This is just, it's not a question, it's just, I don't even know if I should call it a comment. When we talk of Mami Waters, I call them nature spirits, they've always existed from time immemorial. They're all elemental beings, and I don't know, maybe millions and millions of years ago, we human beings, we could see them, but because we've all fallen now, we're not allowed to see them again. So all these elemental beings, they're there, but unfortunately, the human race, the way they are now, we are not able to see them. So thank you for highlighting all this. Thank you.
Thank you. We do see them, though. No, we see them, which is why we're able to do the book, because there are people who still see them. That's why that fracture, when we were ripped apart and we've gone over into the different spaces, remember, we will see bodies of water there, because as you said, wherever the water is, because the water is our life, it's primordial, so it cannot be. So there are people who see the Mami Wata, they'll dream the Mami Wata, it's happening, it's not gone at all.
Sorry.
Oh, the young lady, I remember she did have her hand up.
I just wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on Beyonce and her, I guess, I don't know whether to call it promotion, but she's obviously, I think, apparently an Oshun follower, so do you see it as a distraction, or do you think it's genuine?
So the sister was asking, what do I think about the fact that Beyonce has been, is considered a follower of you see, that's the bit about it. I don't really want to get, for me, it's really about the moment and the time that we're in. Beyonce is effectively like a modern day goddess. Let's face that. Let's just break down the name and make it more real. Yeah? Effectively, Beyonce is operating like a goddess. Like, you know, there's a book, there's an author, she's actually a traditional as well, who talks about the fact that black women or African women were the only people that never really knew, at the beginning, it was always about the matriarchal, so we never really came through this idea of the patriarchy. That was something that later came. And she was saying that it was those ancients, like the Greek, the Roman, the whomever, that called us goddesses. They called us goddesses. So with this feminism thing, she queries, she's saying, well, why are you really buying into this feminism? You don't even need that, because you had something that was far more organic way before. So the fact that Beyonce is doing this, I don't think she has a choice. You know, for me, it's like Mami Ocean and the deities, however way we want to look at them, they're choosing you. So for you to reflect and you to represent them. So either way we look at it, somewhere along the line, she was selected as a goddess in our modern way of seeing things, to then Mami to say, look, you can see me this way if you can't see me through your auntie that's next door, because I'm ostracized, that's the other thing, by my family. Yeah, so if my nieces can't see me saying, look, let's go to the river and do a thing, they can see Beyonce, and maybe one of them will follow the trail back to the source.
Yeah.
Wow, you weren't all asking all these many questions before.
Three more.
Yeah. First, I just want to thank you because you're on a very difficult journey. Colonization is terrible, and it's done evil to all of us. Because what they did was cut the tongue of the people. When you take the language of the people, you've taken their lives. But they found out that when you point a finger, they say in Yoruba, when you point a finger at someone, there are finger that's pointing at you. They failed in many instances, and we just have to find out where they fail, and that's where we start. For example, do you know they never translated science books, engineering books, and things to any African country, but they translated the Bible just to buttress their point. So we have to go back to the simplest form of education to re-educate ourselves about all these things. At the moment, we're explaining our spirituality through their own language and through their own religiosity. People, at the moment, there's a confusion. People confuse spirituality with religion. You know, you talk about spirituality, someone tells you I'm a Christian. It has nothing to do with spirituality. Africans are spiritual people, and that's why we were liberal enough to accept anything that's brought to us. Islam comes in, they take it. Christianity comes in, say, okay, all right, if you want to practice, as long as you don't touch our spirituality. But they have made it impossible for us to be able to explain our spirituality globally to ourselves. And not until we find a way of simplifying what our deities are. Not at one point they were writing them as small gods. There's nothing like small god. An Orisha is an Orisha. You know? I mean, nobody calls the saints small gods in Catholicism or in, you know? But when it comes to us, they have to belittle everything. Like, for a long time, I'm sure, people are just beginning to understand that black people are human. Thank you very much.
Sorry, just to add to what you were saying, about the Orisha, the role of the Orisha. Professor Sophie Oluwale, are you aware of her? Yes. Sophie Oluwale, she was a philosopher basically, and she made loads of TikTok videos that have gone viral and stuff, explaining about a lot of this cosmology and talking about Orishas and them being specifically not like demigods or whatever, but being something separate to themselves, you know, as intermediaries basically with the supreme God. Yeah. But the question I really wanted to ask you was when you said that you were not, that you weren't familiar with so much of the music and the songs and things. Are you familiar with the London Lukumi Choir?
Lukumi Choir, I think I've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm there. I've actually composed music for them and done various things, and like they have a big sort of repository of songs, especially Oshun oriented songs and Santeria and that sort of thing. So I mean, if you wanted to get access to that type of information, I can put you in touch with Daniela, who leads the choir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's excellent. Yeah. Thank you. There's some of the fact. Thank you. That's great. I look forward to it.
Good evening, Michelle. It's nice coming across you. I'm very, very, very impressed with your discussion, the topic this evening. One thing I would like to emphasize on is that we, the black race, need to educate ourselves a lot, on which I'm very, very impressed with your knowledge. Because when it comes to spirituality, Africans have relegated their religion, their spiritual consciousness to the lowest level. I came across a book of recent, written, you might have also read about the great man, the man that translated the Bible into English, by name William Tyndale. You could see the way and manner they wrote the Bible, the English, the King James Version, the New Testament and the Old Testament. Like elderly brother rightly said, nothing about African religion or African or even technology or science, everything is written in African language. We've actually been relegated. I hope we do more
by expatiating, writing more books, and educating, having a lot of symposiums like this. So a lot of us should come out to come and learn. We're grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi. Thank you, Michelle. That was really informative. I really thank you very much. My name's Yewande. I'm one of the adult children from White Nanny Black Child. And I grew up really, really troubled. I had a lot of trauma. And the thing that really got me through my trauma was, at that time, understanding the Virgin Mary followed me everywhere. She followed me everywhere. I had several figures follow me everywhere. And I got to learn later on in life that that Virgin Mary was actually Mami Wata, because I have many dreams still today of Mami Wata. I'm saying that it is no taboo to return and fetch what is ours rightfully. I come from a family, a very big family, who are very big Christians. And for very, very many years, I've been talking about my love for the Orisha. Both me and my twin sister talk about our love for the Orisha. There was nothing I could do about it. It's what guided me in my childhood. And I just wanted to say that, you know, thank you so much. I have, for the last, as I've been saying, last couple of years, been really intensified in terms of dealing with a lot of trauma. And I went to Nigeria for the first time in 25 years in February, and I was initiated, so I'm now Ianifa. And I found out, if I could just let me finish, I found out during my Itefa, it's getting a bit emotional, I found out during my Itefa, when I went for my Itefa, I was waiting for them to say to me, Oshun, or Mami Wata, or Imoja, and when they told me it was Ogun and Oro on my head, I straight away got it, but my family didn't. And they were saying, but Oro can't be on her head. It's a masculine energy. It can't be. And they were saying, you know, they could understand Ogun because my name is Ogunaike. So what happened as a result of that, I understood really clearly that that crown of Ogun and Oro had chosen me as a family thing. It was a family thing. It was not supposed to be removed from my family. And from the womb until very recently, I had been through a really dark night of the soul. And until I went and got that crown back on my head, even though it was a little bit shaky to get here from February to here, I understood Ogun. I went through so much as a child that was brutal, that the only way I could tell you as a testimony that I'm alive today is because Ogun and Oro on my head. Then fast forward down to, where are we now? We're in October. Early September, late August, I had a chance to have a divination from another Ianifa in Nigeria, and my dear friend Lekon Babalola had been saying for many years, you, go back home, your Oshun, go back home, your Manja, go back home. And I kept saying to him, no, it's Ogun and Oro. I finally did this initiation, this consultation, that I actually had a dream and a message from my egg bear about, and I found out finally that yes, the woman, the loving force that was following me around as a child, as the Virgin Mary, dressed in blue, real blue, was actually a Moja, so she does have my head. And Ogun and Oro came back on my head as the crown for my family. So things have been very rough for my family until now. And I'm so proud that you've done this. I actually really want to talk to you about Mami Wata because I also did a talk about 2009, 2010 in South London that a lot of people are still coming up to me and saying, why don't you do it again? So I'm ready now. And hearing someone like you, because we need more like you. It isn't a competition. As many of us can get in and spread the word about African traditions, and we can even practice them side by side, it is no taboo to return and fetch it. And that's what Sankofa means.
Ashe. Thank you, everyone.
No? Final. Okay. So we're going to move to President Obonjo of the Laughter Republic.
start by saying to you that I am offended. Let me tell you why I'm offended. She did not even use my pronouns, His Excellency. But it is nice to be here. Let me set some ground rules. You can see the missing chairs. Have a look at the missing chairs. These are people who did not laugh at my last jokes. They have gone missing. Some of you are probably wondering, why is he wearing an army uniform? You probably think the Halifax man is now in uniform. My name is President Obonjo of Laughter Republic. I am a self-proclaimed African leader, now living in St. Albans in Hertfordshire. I love the train journey from King's Cross to St. Albans because everybody thinks I'm getting off at Luton. I promise not to talk about being black, even though I've been black for 51 years, I'm now 56. Thank you very much. Let us acknowledge all the women who are wearing natural hair. If you are wearing Brazilian hair, I'm going to touch you. Especially if it's from Primark. I come from a country called Laughter Republic. It's very close to Wakanda. If you do not know where Wakanda is, I'm sorry, you're racist. Laughter Republic consists of 3 tribes. The Okorodudu tribe, which means goodness, the Kamutu tribe, which means gracious, and the Kaputu tribe, which means great balls of fire. And I come from the Great Balls of Fire tribe. The state capital of Laughter Republic is called Baghdad. We have several states: Islamabad, Bantata, Choco Town, Giggle Town, Reflex Town, and so on and so forth. The Western media will tell you that there was a revolution in my country. I am the first elected military dictator in the world. I just had to make sure my name was the only name on the ballot box. If you don't get my jokes, blame the British educational system. You see, when I took over, actually when I was elected in Laughter Republic, we had wet seasons in my country. As soon as I got elected, I moved the equator very close to the Congo Basin. I moved it to my country. Now we have wet seasons. We have beautiful summers. Beautiful beaches, not beaches. Beautiful beaches, not beaches. Our schools are full since the election. Our shops are full since the election. And a lot of single women since the election. Madam, ask me how many wives do I have? I have 6 wives, because the doctor said I should rest on Sunday. If you don't get my jokes, blame the British education system. Democracy is a virus, and we need to flatten the curve. Look at Britain. There is nothing working in Britain right now. Interest rates have gone up 14 times. Electricity and gas prices have gone up. I mean, why would you hold a seminar, a conference at this time of the day if it wasn't because you guys want to save your electricity and gas prices? That's why. Nothing is working in Britain. Let me give you an example. The NHS, which I call the Nigerian Health Service, doesn't work. Nothing is working in Britain right now. What you need is you need to let your leaders die in office. Yes. Now we have Sunak. Sunak is the first British Asian Prime Minister. And all white people, even though they are concerned about it, they don't want to say anything about it, they just accept it. British Asian Prime Minister. I'm sure he can't wait to partition some parts of England. Who asked you to laugh? You are supposed to be looking at the computer. But I don't know how many of you are Tories or Labour Party members. If you are a Tory Party member, raise your hands up. Labour, you're a Tory Party member. Are you serious? You're a coconut. You're going to go and watch her book, The Coconut. You see, Sunak wasn't supposed to be Prime Minister at the very beginning. If you remember, it was Javid who started a coup against Boris Johnson. But because the Tory party members couldn't tell the difference between Sunak and Javid, they blamed Sunak. I have a dream! Not a wet dream, a political dream. That I got fed up of the Sunak government and I appointed the following people to my cabinet. Deputy President, Trevor McDonald. Secretary of State for Arts and Culture, Chris Eubank. My Food Minister, Levi Roots. My Sports Minister, John Terry. My Transport Secretary, Jeremy Clarkson. And the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the Halifax Bank. I don't need to explain my jokes to you, but I have put 2 racist people in a black cabinet. Thank you very much for that. You're probably wondering, why am I wearing an army uniform? I blame my wife. I'm married to an English wife. I married her for passport rather than for love. We have 3 lovely children. I gave them English names. James Alexandra Bonjo, 18. Margaret Alexandra Bonjo, 12. And Cassandra Alexandra Bonjo, 6. We made love every 6 years based on the government child benefit policy. But let me tell you what happened 15 years ago. My wife was supporting Hillary Clinton. I was supporting Obama. And I knew that my wife was going to switch allegiance to Obama. As soon as Obama became president, there was Obama this, Obama that. Obama was on TV. I used to live in Stratford, now they call it Westfield. I moved to St. Albans, a nice middle-class area. My wife still wasn't into. She was still very, very into Obama. Bought me 2 books to read, The Audacity of Hope and Dreams of My Father. I read the books, and I noticed there were similarities with myself and Obama. Got to a state that every time I made love to my wife, I recited the Obama speeches. They said this day will never come. They said we set our sights too high. We were too disillusioned, too divided to achieve a common purpose. You have done what the cynics said you couldn't do. I'm not sure whether I should do the rest of the joke, because the way some of you are looking at me, it looks like you guys don't have sex. Thank you very much for that. But this is nice. It's nice to come to a place like this, to come and perform. And I did say that I wasn't sure how this was going to go, because normally when I am performing, there are like 4 other comedians before me. But you have been intellectually stimulated. And you, man, you are folding your arms, wondering, what the hell is this? I am now a viral star on TikTok. I don't know how many of you know TikTok. It is a social media platform. And over the last 12 days, my life has been in a mess. Let me tell you why. I recorded a video when Donald Trump was arrested in my bedroom from uniforms I bought from Stevenage and caps that I bought from Stevenage. And I recorded a video. And I said, dear American people, my name is President Obonjo of Black Republic. Donald Trump is my friend. If you do not release him within 24 hours, I will come and invade America. You will not believe what happened. I posted it on Friday night. Saturday morning, I had gone viral. One of Donald Trump's supporters, who has 1.5 million followers, wrote on Twitter, African president supports Donald Trump. Americans are so stupid. All over. Go and have a look. TikTok everywhere. Africa, I am not an African president. Okay, maybe I have a little bit of mental health issues, but I am not. I am not an African president. And they posted on Twitter, on TikTok, everywhere. 3 days later, Reuters, the press agency, gets in touch with me to find out whether I am a real comedian or a real president. Americans were tagging the man who just got overthrown, Bongo of Gabon, because Bonjo sounds like Bogo. But you know, my mother thinks I have a mental health problem. Because why would I wake up at the age of 45 and start calling myself president of a country that doesn't exist? Why would I buy army uniforms that I bought from Stevenage and come to Stratford and be calling myself president of a great country? Well, I'd be saying to my mom, Mom, guess what? Look at Zelensky of Ukraine. He used to be a fictional president and he was a comedian. Now he is a real president. Mom, I don't have mental health issues. Sorry, I'm not supposed to be laughing at Mom. Mom, I don't have mental health issues. I am going to be president one day, but I don't know where I'm going to be president. You have white privilege. I have military privilege. Let me explain. At times when I travel, because I do this, I've been gigging across the United Kingdom. And there was a day I went to Liverpool, outside London, performing to 350 people. They were screaming my name, Mr. President, you're funnier than Lenny Henry. You're funnier than all these TV comics that you see on TV. You should be alive at the Apollo. I was driving on the M6 in this uniform, saying they loved me. Driving on the M6 in this uniform, saying they loved me. Guess who stopped me? The police. And he came towards me. He said, hello, sir. I said, hello. He said, keep serving this country. I said, hello. And he asked me to go. Can you imagine? The relationship between the black man and the police is always very complicated. So when my black friends tell me that there's racism in the United Kingdom, I say, wear an army uniform, you get it. Look, I could say more, but I am very aware that this show needs to end at 5 o'clock, and I have been waiting. This is what is really interesting about this event. I have been here since 9:45 this morning. There were a few people here, and I'm not criticizing. This has been really, really fantastic. But during lunch, there were more black people in there. Where is everybody now? People just came to eat. Don't come and talk to me about coconut. I even heard someone say, no, where's the jollof rice? Thank you very much.
Yeah, actually, I must admit I did think, where's the jollof rice? Well, I'm just going to make some short remarks to round up the conference, because we've come to the end, and the venue, come to the end of our time in this venue. And one of the things I would like to say as we come to the end is that we see that history is a very complex and very layered thing. As Professor Adi said in the morning, he was speaking about unbalanced histories, that maybe we focus so much on one aspect of history that it causes a distortion. But I found out from my own, for myself as a student of history, that history, it has to be selective. You pick an issue, you pick a geographical location, you pick a period of time, and you select some incidents to make an argument. And that's why we need other histories. That's not because that history is wrong, it's always partial. Histories are always partial. Histories will always tell the story of one group of people within a society. I've also found out from being a scholar that history is actually quite an expensive thing to produce. It takes someone years of their life. Florence said it took her 15 years to write her book, which is just the story of her life. Not if you want to talk about a community, of interviewing people, of documenting things. It takes money, and it takes time. And it takes strategy, actually, to make histories happen. And one of the strategies that do work is oral history events like this one, where people come and speak. And in today, we've heard so many histories, which I hope are recorded. Yes, they are. And which therefore are accessible for students, for other people who might hear a word and say, yeah, I want to take that further. So that's one thing that we can do, is create events like this. From responses from the audience and from Q&A, we can see that this has sparked many ideas for many people. And I would say, write them down, share them with others. If anything, pass them across the Iroko Theatre. Even if they cannot investigate it, they can share questions, and sharing questions is a very, very powerful thing. One other thing I want to happen on is the idea of change and time. In a number of the sessions after the speakers, we talked about changes, how language has changed over time. In Florence's situation, talk, she talked about her talk brought up how complex our social history is. The history of Nigeria is a transnational history. It's a history of people going backwards and forwards for generations. We looked at changes of language. We looked at changes on the way we do our hair. We saw pictures of some Igbo men with their hair done. And I'm aware that in some universities in Nigeria, they're banning men from doing their hair. They're saying it's a Western thing. But actually, it's always been an African thing. But one generation forgets what another generation has done. And I think one of the powerful things of history is to pick out why we've done things, why we've dropped things, which things do we continue on, which things do we stop doing. Because not everything is positive. And there's many positive things we've left aside and we can gather up. And so I know that Professor Adi was saying, should we celebrate? What do we celebrate? And celebrate people's contributions. And, you know, he was pointing out that sometimes it's the workers, sometimes the unknown people that have contributed the most. And therefore I would say that your history is very important. Our individual histories are important because we're part of communities and families and stories and trajectories, and we have to value that ourselves. And as we put ourselves forward to tell our story, you'll probably hear other people who've had similar experiences come forward. And that's how we start creating narratives. And we always hear, we need to change the narrative. Because without a narrative, there's no context for action. Stories provide a context in which we can act. So thank you very much, Iroko Theatre, for bringing this conference together, for creating a story about home from home. And I'd like a member of the board of Iroko to come forward and give the vote of thanks.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much. My name is Bola Shania Thomas. I am the Vice Chair of the Iroko Board. I'm going to read from my phone because there's nothing worse than forgetting somebody. So I hope I don't, because it'd be even worse if I read from my phone and then still forget somebody. So hopefully I don't do that. Today for me has been an amazing day, a sensational event. Growing up in England in the 70s as a Nigerian British woman, we didn't have anything like this. We didn't have any role models. We didn't have anyone to look to. All I had was my family and my parents' friends. So I think it's just such a wonderful opportunity for us here and for the younger generation coming. So for that, first of all, I want to say a massive thank you to Alex and to Iroko for having the vision in the first place, because without the vision, we wouldn't have had this opportunity to celebrate ourselves. So thank you to you. Thank you to the Heritage Fund for the financial support, because without them, this dream wouldn't become a reality. Thank you to Abiola Dosunmu, who started the day with an invocation. To Fumi, for your wonderful moderation, for keeping everything running smoothly. And to each of the speakers, so Professor Hakim Adi, Lekea Lee, Hassan Aliyu, Juwon Ogungbe, Rapper TC, Florence Olajide, Michelle Yah, and last but definitely not least, President Obonjo. Thank you to all our volunteers in blue for your time and hospitality. You've really made us feel welcome, and you've been really, really busy. So thank you to all of you. You must be exhausted, but honestly, it's really been helpful. Thank you to the caterers for the delicious food. Thank you to the media team for keeping the presentation going. The videographers, the photographers, sound engineers, the DJ. Thank you to the university for this venue. It's nice to have a really special venue to have this event in. And finally, thank you to all of you for coming today to share this special event with us. The conference is only one aspect of the Home from Home project, and if you look in this document, you will find more information about the Home from Home project and all the things that we are trying to achieve, and I know we will achieve by the time the project is finished, is complete. So it'll be a project that has a legacy, and that's the main thing about it, to have a legacy, not just something that's just for a finite period of time. And also, I want to remind you that if you have any feedback, if you have any questions, if you have anything for any of the speakers for today, please write it down and pass it on to Iroko, and it will be forwarded to the speakers, or the feedback will be taken into account for any other events. So as we wind up, we Nigerians, we're proud people. We really are proud. But today, we really have something to be proud about. We can stand up, we can celebrate, we can hold our heads up high. So to everybody, to all of us Nigerians doing our hardest and working hard and making a difference, keep going, keep it up, and we'll just continue to grow from strength to strength. So thank you all for your support. I look forward to obviously, I forgot someone. So I'd like to say a big, big thank you to Prince Abiola. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your support. Very much appreciated. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Until the next time. Bye-bye.